Hello, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the 2021 American Diabetes Association Ask the Expert series. Today's topic is Diabetes 101. Whether you're new to diabetes or need a refresher, we'll discuss what you need to know to help you manage your diabetes. My name is Carla Cox, registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist, and your host for today's program. Our Ask the Expert series is all about answering questions from our listeners, so start getting your questions ready. Our topic today, as I mentioned, is Diabetes 101, Understanding the Basics. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions of our expert. Type your question into the Q&A box and click Send. Click the thumbs up icon to like a question. This will help us identify popular questions to prioritize which ones we will answer. If you are on the phone, you will need to join online to ask a question. You can find the link to join at diabetes.org/experts. If you are having technical difficulties, please use the chat function. Okay, now a little bit about why we're here today. The American Diabetes Association, with sponsorship by Walmart, is focusing on 4 important topics in diabetes management to help you live well with diabetes. We'll cover information and tips to help you take charge of your health. The health and safety of all those we serve at the American Diabetes Association is our top priority. The CDC has determined that COVID-19 is a serious public health threat. In general, people with diabetes face greater risks of complications when dealing with viral infections, and that is true of COVID-19 as well. We encourage persons with diabetes to get vaccinated, and you have questions about the vaccination, please talk with your healthcare provider. Fully vaccinated people can resume activities without wearing a mask or physically distancing, except where required in the government, federal, state, local, or tribal health places. The ADA encourages people with diabetes to follow the guidance of the CDC and to contact your medical provider if you suspect that you are showing symptoms or have been exposed to COVID-19. For our most up-to-date information, please visit our website at diabetes.org/coronavirus or call 1-800-DIABETES, which is 1-800-342-2383. Before we start opening up our Q&A with our expert, we would like to ask you a few questions. Please click on the box that best answers the question, and you will see the total results on your screen. Question number 1. Which food group should you fill half of your plate with? 1, protein, 2, carbohydrates, 3, non-starchy vegetables, and 4, fruit. I will repeat that question. Which food group should you fill half your plate with? 1, protein, 2, carbohydrates, 3, non-starchy vegetables, and 4, fruit. Question number 2, true or false? Regular aerobic exercise can help lower your blood glucose. Is that true, false, or are you not sure? Once again, true or false? Regular aerobic exercise can help lower your blood glucose. True, false, or not sure? Question number 3, generally, how confident are you in your ability to manage your diabetes? Use a scale of 1 to 5, with 1, not at all confident, 5, very confident, and 3 areas in between, number 2, 3, or 4. Once again, generally, how confident are you in your ability to manage your diabetes? Use a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 not confident and 5 very confident. And our final question, number 4, do you regularly meet with your healthcare team to help you manage your diabetes? 1, yes, 2, no, and 3, not applicable. Once again, do you regularly meet with your healthcare team to help you manage your diabetes? 1, yes, 2, no, and 3, not applicable. Thank you for answering these questions. So here is our percentage of answers, which is kind of fun to see and see where you fell as well. And now I'm happy to introduce our guest for today's event, Myra Cantazaro. Dr. Cantazaro is a family nurse practitioner, a certified diabetes care and education specialist, and she is board certified in advanced diabetes management. She has also completed her clinical doctoral degree. Dr. Cantazaro's research has focused on the value of a multidisciplinary team approach with remote glucose monitoring to improve glucose control and quality of life in Hispanic adults with uncontrolled type 2 diabetes. For the past 6 years, working in a clinical setting, she has had the privilege to provide diabetes management and education to thousands of patients and families within the Rio Grande Valley. Myra, welcome, and why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, sorry. It's a great way to start. Muted. Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Myra Cantazaro. So a little bit about me. Since I was a little girl, I recall saying when I grow up, I want to be able to help and take care of people living with diabetes. Growing up close to my grandfather, I witnessed the impact uncontrolled diabetes had on him, from having bilateral amputations to requiring dialysis, to finally the day that came that we lost him due to the complications associated with uncontrolled diabetes. So since then, I've been very passionate about diabetes education. Been very grateful to have the opportunity to be able to care for patients living with diabetes, but also to be here and hopefully be of a resource to everyone listening today. Carla, I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm truly happy to be here and excited to address any questions as best as I can. So thank you.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. I've been on a committee with Myra and was so impressed with her enthusiasm that it's one of the reasons we asked her to join us. So Myra, as we are waiting for our questions to begin rolling in, I'm going to go ahead and kick off with the first question. Mm-hmm. Thinking about someone who is newly diagnosed with diabetes, this is going to be a hard one. What is the most important thing a person can do to work with this diagnosis?
I think that's a great question. Off with a few things. I think there's not just one specific important thing, but if I can just mention a brief priority, like a priority of things, is first and foremost is accepting. You want to have that acceptance of having diabetes and understand that developing this disease does not represent personal failure at all, by all means. Second thing is you want to take care of your diabetes soon after diagnosis. This will definitely help pay off now and in the long run. I really want to emphasize this, that being diagnosed with diabetes is not a death sentence by any means, but it is a serious disease that requires a lot of willingness to make some changes in our lifestyle. And third and foremost, I think one of the most important thing as well is finding reliable resources and educate yourself on this progressive disease and create that support system that includes your family, your friends, your healthcare providers, especially when it comes to your healthcare providers, having the diabetes educators, finding one and making them part of your team. Now we live in an era where we're very blessed that we have technology and we're able to find resources in a couple of seconds. So into those resources that provide valuable information in regards to taking care of your diabetes is very, very important.
Great. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask another question. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties on getting the questions. So my other question is, talk to me about how eating, when you're talking about eating a fruit or vegetable with every meal as part of the whole diabetes suggestions, as well as people that don't have diabetes, actually. So what is the contribution that they give that can help people with diabetes have a better life?
In regards to eat fruits and vegetables. So a couple of things about fruits and vegetables, because I remember, that's a common question that I speak with my patients about. Fruits and vegetables, not only do they have carbohydrates in them, but they also contain a lot of nutrients and vitamins that our body needs. So that's why it's important to incorporate them and having them in our plate, on our, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we're able to incorporate them. We do have to keep in mind that fruits, especially fruits, I live in South Texas, a lot of my patients love watermelon. A lot of the fruits contain a lot of sugar. So it all comes down to the portion, the amount of it. Having a cup of fruit, that's a good limitation. What you don't want to have is, they say I can eat a fruit, so I'm going to go to the grocery store and buy myself a watermelon and make sure I finish this watermelon in just one sitting. That's something that we don't want to do. So ultimately, definitely incorporate more fruits, but just in my, especially when it comes to fruits.
Okay, thank you so much. And what about lean meats? Why do we push the lean meat concept? I'm kind of going over the nutrition pieces first. So why do we do that?
So lean meats don't have carbs. They very, seldomly have carbs. So they're not going to impact our sugar levels. Help, fill us up.
Okay, that sounds good. So there we go. Okay, so here we are. I can start reading some of these questions.
Which is kind of
odd. Okay, so does summer heat raise blood sugars?
Summer heat raise blood sugars. Definitely not going to cause a sense of stress, which if you are stressed out, that can increase your blood sugars, but overall just heat and no.
So what about if a person is dehydrated? If a person is dehydrated, would you see them would you see them possibly having some high blood sugars if they're dehydrated?
My internet connection is unstable. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
So sorry, I just lost you there completely. I just heard something about dehydration.
Yeah, so in the hot weather, if someone is dehydrated, would that cause high blood sugars because of the concentration? Okay,
no,
okay.
Absolutely not.
So the next question is how to decide if someone like a 30 or 40-year-old has type 2 diabetes, great question, or type 1 diabetes.
And that the question is being a 34-year-old, right?
30 or 40-year-old, kind of in that age group.
Year old. And that's actually a good question because a lot of patients don't understand the different types of diabetes. First and foremost is once you do get diagnosed, type 1 is often seen in the younger population, but that does not mean that a person who has who's 30 years or older, even 40, they can have some antibodies and autoimmunity that can be related to type 1 or different types of diabetes. So if you are concerned, that's something that you want to have, especially if you are Caucasian, if you have family history of having family members all have type 1 diabetes, then that's something that you want to ask your healthcare provider, can I get tested? And they'll be more than happy to run those tests to see if you have type 1 diabetes. But majority of the population has type 2 diabetes. If you are a little bit overweight, you haven't been very active with exercise, then that's, more than likely chances are there's going to be type 2 diabetes.
I think another hallmark of that is if you soon go on to insulin without being able to manage it with any kind of oral medication, that's another red flag that maybe you should be tested and ask your provider. If you're unable to manage it with all these oral medications they're throwing at you and you need insulin quickly within the first year or so, that would also be an indication. Another question coming in. Oh, go ahead.
No, especially I was just thinking when you said that, especially if you were diagnosed for having diabetes because you were hospitalized due to an episode of diabetes ketoacidosis. So that's definitely something that can signal like, okay, you might have type 1 instead of type 2, requiring insulin to your point.
Absolutely. Here's another great question. Since Victoza is causing digestive problems, my doctor would like for me to try Ozempic. Is that formula easier in the digestive system since it's only once weekly, whereas Victoza is every day?
I think that's a great question. And that comes down to being aware of the class of medications. So Victoza, Ozempic, Bydureon, Byetta, Trulicity, all of these are GLP-1 and GLP-1 class of medications. They are going to impact your digestive systems. They're really going to slow down the transitioning of food, which leads to that satiety, that sense of fullness. So chances are you're still going to experience some of the symptoms, but it's I always say, don't give up on that class of medications. That class of medication is very wonderful in improving glucose control. If one didn't work, be open to try another one to see how you're able to tolerate, because chances are you are, and maybe you just need a lower dose, because the higher you go at those, especially when it comes to Victoza, Ozempic, the more chances are you're going to be experiencing some of those symptoms. So just take your time going up, getting to the higher dose.
Thank you. Another question is coming in from Stacy. I am a type 2 diabetic. What foods can I eat when my blood sugar is high, but I haven't eaten in several hours and I'm really hungry?
Okay, so your sugars are high and you're really hungry and you want to eat something. My recommendation is try to get a snack that has about 10 grams of carbohydrates or less, something with low carbs, maybe something with more protein in there, so it can kind of help take that feeling of that you're feeling hungry, and it keeps your sugars more under control for longer periods. But if you don't want your sugars to go even up higher, do not grab a snack that's going to be very high in carbohydrates.
Great, thank you. So I have a question from Bob, and he says, as a diabetic, am I considered to be immune compromised? And how dangerous is the Delta variant if I'm indeed infected?
Okay, Bob, great question, Bob. It's not about being immunocompromised is and that's what I want to make sure I stress. Having diabetes is not as, you know, oh, I'm going to be prone to all of this. You do want to have diabetes that's very, control your diabetes. And the chances of the Delta with COVID and the variant, my internet connection again is going unstable. I don't know if anybody can hear me. It's just taking the precautions again, controlling, keeping your sugars under check, controlling them, eating healthy, exercising, vaccine, taking all the measures possible to help prevent. But at the end, we're all of, getting it.
Okay, thank you. Is diabetes reversible, 100% reversible? And Myra is unstable right now, so I will answer that question. It is managed, so it's 100% managed. If that's possible. So you can manage it well, and if you're managing it, you don't have any consequences from having been diagnosed with diabetes. However, if you don't manage it, or let's say you lost 15 or 20 pounds, you started exercising, you're eating healthy, and your blood sugar normalized. Well, if you went back to gaining that weight and not eating healthy, you would probably be back to having diabetes. So it doesn't really go away, but it is managed. So Myra, I just answered this question, which is diabetes possible to reverse? And not really. You can manage it. So we got through that question. Okay.
So I don't know if it's the area where I'm at. I'm so sorry, in my house or what it is, but I'm just going, or we're going to have bad weather. I apologize. You just froze completely. And I was like, am I talking to myself?
Yeah, it's okay.
You gotta love technology, right? To some extent. Right. I apologize, but thank you, Carla, for answering that question.
Yes. I have a question from Susan. My blood sugar tends to be 144 to 165 first thing in the morning, and the monitor says that is high. How can I fix it when all I've been doing is sleeping? I love that question.
That's actually a great question. So first, foremost, you want to, your fasting sugars in the morning should be between 90 to 130. And there's a lot of factors that can contribute, that you want to troubleshoot. First and foremost is, did I have a late night dinner? Or before I go into bed, did I have a snack? So a lot of times you'd be surprised. A lot of us tend to have a little snack before we go to bed. We can be watching TV and you're like, oh, let me just grab a little bit of bowl of cereal or fruit. And that can impact your sugars for them to be elevated in the morning. Another thing that's very important that I stress to my patients is, especially if they're on insulin, is making sure that their sugar is not dropping in the middle of the night. because if it tends to be dropping or it tends to go low, then your liver is going to start producing sugar. And then you're going to wake up with the sugar a little bit more elevated in the morning than what it should be.
Great. So I think it's a hard balancing act. It's kind of like juggling, because there is also something called dawn phenomenon, which means that sometimes people get a little growth hormone in the morning, even if you're not growing, and your glucose will go up a little bit. And really that has to be problem solved by changing the medication that you're taking, exercising a little later, those kinds of things. But we have kind of the same question here coming in from Joyce. And how can you prevent the liver dump, which is what she calls it, in the early morning? I am type 1. I tried splitting up my dose of Atlantis, and now I'm taking it early in the morning, 8 a.m., still dealing with high levels when I wake up. So any suggestions?
Suggestions in that is you want to also talk first and foremost, make sure you bring this up to your healthcare providers. Lantus is a great slow acting insulin that's been available for many years. However, there's been studies that have shown that it doesn't last the whole 24 hours. So that can be one of the situations that could be happening as well. Maybe you're lacking that coverage, and maybe moving you to another type of the newer basal insulins that are available that can have more of that flat level effect would be probably more beneficial in that perspective. But definitely bring that up to your healthcare provider, and I'm sure that they'll be happy to troubleshoot and see if it's time to make a change.
Another thing to consider, and you've probably done this, and I don't know what your insurance is or how you're doing, but another option would be an insulin pump, because then you can titrate the dose, meaning you can change the dose. So instead of giving one steady dose all day, you can give more in those early morning hours when you see a rise in glucose. So that's another thing to discuss. And there's some great insulin pumps available. I work with them all the time with my patients. And in general, they love them. So something to think about. Okay, so we have a question coming from Elaine. What are the main side effects of metformin?
Metformin, the main ones are going to be also GI related, with the most common one being a little bit of like diarrhea. So when I prescribe metformin, it's the first line treatment option that we want to put patients on. I start them slow on the 500 milligrams dose. I say, take it with your food to help diminish this, and then gradually increase it to the maximum dose that you're able to tolerate it. But the thing to watch out is for is diarrhea. If you are experiencing that, talk to your healthcare provider, ask them to see what type of metformin you're on. Maybe you just need a lower dose, or making sure that you're on the extended release. That also can diminish those that diarrhea or GI side effects.
Great, thank you. And we have a question from Wanda. Thank you for providing the webinar. You're more than welcome. We love doing it. And where can I find a diabetes prevention program class in my area? My parents, aunts, uncles, sisters all have been diagnosed with diabetes. And I recently was diagnosed with prediabetes. I can't find education. I live in Northern Virginia. What would you suggest?
Resources online now with technology and telemedicine. I know if we live in an area where we don't have access to an institute where they have healthcare providers like diabetes educators, where they have programs set up, a lot of them have incorporated now telehealth. So I would recommend going to the resources for the American Diabetes Association. That's key. And then also for the American Diabetes Educators Association as well, for the ADCES.
Yeah, great. Thanks. A question coming in from Catherine. Hello, I'm recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I pick up my testing supplies tonight. I've made appointments with my doctor and endocrinologist and diabetic nutritionist. In the meantime, now what?
So from what I understand, this question is you're waiting for your appointment with your endocrinologist and your healthcare providers. Okay. First, you want to make sure that you're already on medication. I'm sure your primary care provider have already, started you on something. Start taking it as indicated and start monitoring your sugars. I would recommend monitoring your sugars fasting in the morning, early when you wake up. And your target glucose levels should be between that 90 and 130 range. Keep a blood sugar log. You can also start monitoring before your meals or 2 hours after. So that way, when you go see your endocrinologist, you can have that like information already, data for them. Like, this is what I've been taking, and here are my blood sugar logs. So they can kind of identify if it's working or what's not. And also, start learning certain foods, certain lifestyle changes that you can start incorporating, because it's never too late, and you can start taking care of your diabetes starting right now.
And maybe mention a few of what are those things. We talked about eating healthy. What about exercise? Was that a big part of this?
Huge. So physical activity is a big component, especially wanting to, what we call it, like type of exercise that we call cardio. And it doesn't take too much work. People sometimes when we're like, oh, you have to exercise, they're like, they associate like, I don't have time for that, or it's too much. And it can be as simple as walking, swimming, dancing. Just find whatever activity you enjoy and you want to do it. Start off slow. Sometimes I tell my patients, I get it, we are busy and sometimes that's in the least of our priorities, but we need to gradually incorporate it. And even if it's just 5-10 minutes right now, if you can give me that, that's great. And then gradually increasing those increments until you get to your goal that you need to. So small little changes, but on a daily basis, it goes far.
There's a great YouTube on 23 and a half hours.
Oh, really?
And it basically is, you have 23 and a half hours to do whatever you want to do. You just need to exercise for 30 minutes.
I love that.
I love the concept, because when you really think about it, you think, we're all too busy, but maybe you watch a little news in the evening or something where you get on an exercise bike, ask for that for Christmas. I mean, I think there are ways around it, and I would talk to your diabetes educator maybe to help you figure out how to make that work for you.
That plan. Yes.
So we have a question coming in from Aaron. I have had diabetes for a long time, but just learned about what is actually happening inside my body. I was so worried about following my management plan that I never learned the why. What are some things that doctors might not usually tell people with diabetes that they should know about what is actually happening and why you need to do these things? Not just you have diabetes and do it, it's why.
So the one way I like to explain that to my patients when I tell them about diabetes is our key now we're having a better understanding of what's affecting diabetes and how we're getting. This is a really complex disease, but ultimately it still goes down to our main key organ system, which is the pancreas. So this pancreas is what's responsible of releasing insulin. So I like to describe it to my patients. It's like, all right, you have this wonderful pancreas, and let's put it as he's your worker, and you've been working him for such a long time. And the more he works, it's just going at it, trying to pump out insulin. And we haven't given that pancreas a little vacation. So what happens when you have a worker that's just working because every time you eat high amounts of carbs, every time you don't exercise, that pancreas is just, being overworked. And as with all workers, once you're being overworked, what's it going to lead to? It's either going to be leading to that worker's going to say, hey, I quit, or it's not going to be able to produce the same amount of efficiency in its work as it was. So that's kind of like what I like to describe it and tell my patients. It's just your pancreas with time is just started getting tired and trying to produce insulin. And it's just been that aspect.
Okay. And so if you're not producing enough insulin, glucose goes up, which is why everybody is diagnosed with diabetes, right? Glucose is high. And how does that glucose, what does it do? It's running around our bloodstream. Does it just stay in the bloodstream, or does it get stuck on stuff? What happens to it?
So with insulin, that's where insulin comes in place to actually help absorb that glucose. So that glucose can go into our cells and we can use it efficiently for energy. So that's where that comes into place.
But if we don't have enough insulin, what happens to the sugar?
So your sugars just keep going higher and higher. You start having the symptoms of hyperglycemia, like you're getting very thirsty, you're needing to urinate a lot, and you're even losing weight.
Okay.
Mhm.
And that sugar can get stuck on stuff too, right? It can get stuck on your kidneys, kind of get incorporated in the kidneys. It can get incorporated in the eyes. I don't actually think there's a part of your body, except maybe the muscle tissue, in which there isn't this ooze of glucose going in. So that's kind of one of the whys, is that it's not just the number you want to get down, but the reason you want to get the number down is to prevent any long-term damage. And the example I use, I loved your example of the worker, but the example I use is if you took a little bit of sugared Kool-Aid and you threw it on your computer, on the keyboard, you just a little bit, you could kind of clean it up, and a little bit more, you kind of clean it up. But if you took the whole glass or a concentrated glass and threw it on your keyboard, it would stop working because it would be sticky. You get sticky too. So you just don't want to pour too much glucose in there.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a great question. This comes from someone who I believe's child probably just got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So it comes from Anne. And she said, my son was just diagnosed about a week ago. We are trying to be very diligent with his meals, but he is very frustrated with after eating. It seems like his blood sugars drop so low, like around the 50s, and he's having to eat several pieces of candy, but it doesn't seem to go up. What could be the problem?
First and foremost, the fact that your son just got diagnosed, I'm sorry to hear, but we want to take care of him. And it seems like you're already doing a great job by being here, asking these questions and finding those resources. You want to make sure first is what is he having for that meal? How much carbohydrates is he taking, and how much insulin is he taking? If he's on insulin, that injectable, or is he on a pump? Because it seems that he's getting also either more insulin than what he needs, or also if he was just recently diagnosed, Carla, correct me if I'm wrong, but then you have this honeymoon stage, if I'm not mistaken. Okay,
That's right.
The honeymoon stage where their pancreas may still be producing a little bit of insulin here and there, and that's what can be causing that shift. So the fact that you're monitoring their sugars before and after, that's very important. You do when you have a low blood sugar, anything less than 70. You want to make sure that you give them at least 15 grams of carbs, wait 15 minutes, recheck their sugar, and then administer another 15 grams of carbohydrates. Also talk to your healthcare provider. You definitely, the fact that you have type 1 diabetes, you want to have a glucagon with you at all times. And now luckily they're available in different forms and very easy to use.
Right, great. And I think the other point is make sure you call your healthcare provider, because this honeymoon can happen. And so the amount of insulin that your son has been getting is probably not appropriate right now. It's too much insulin that's making those blood sugars go down, or not eating enough to compensate for the insulin. But you don't want him to eat up to the insulin. You want him to insulinize for the amount of food he's eating. So I would right away call your healthcare provider and have them adjust that insulin, let them know what's going on. So that's what. Doesn't have to happen. Okay, so this comes from James. What processed foods need to be avoided?
Processed foods. Gotta love processed foods. They're easily accessible. Sometimes they tend to be more inexpensive. I never say that you need to avoid them. I'm not for telling my patients you cannot have that. I don't believe in that. It's definitely, you just want to just have things certain in moderations. But when it comes to processed foods, if you can really avoid certain things, is anything. I don't like to say you need to avoid this. That's my biggest issue that I can say. Just processed foods, keep them in moderation, try to avoid them. And if you really need to eat up something processed, just eat small amounts of it, and not on a daily basis, basically.
Eat the foods in the periphery of the grocery store that are mostly fresh foods. Yeah. So I'm hoping I'm asking this right, but this comes from Ryan. What happens if you are swimming in the pool and your blood sugars are high and you're working at swimming? What happens?
Well, first and foremost, you want to make sure that let's just assume you have type 2 diabetes. Swimming is going to help you. Don't have to worry if your sugars are high. They could be exercise induced. So when we're excited and when we're doing sometimes some like exercise, we could have a little bit of increase in sugars, and that's normal. Your glucose levels can go up. Keep keep swimming, you keep exercising, drink water. Do not hydrate yourself. The last thing you want to do if you're swimming and your sugars are high, you're like, okay, you know what? I want a sugary drink to hydrate myself. You want to make sure that available you have water, preferably.
Okay, great. Is there a number where maybe they shouldn't be exercising? They should wait till their blood sugar comes down? You look at 300, you look at 275?
I would say it just depends. That number can be very individualized per patient. Some patients are very sensitive when they're already above 250, and some can be up in 250s and they're perfectly fine. It can be greater than 300. Ask your healthcare providers, ask them what's a safe number for you. I would feel more inclined to say definitely if anything's above 250 or 300, definitely you want to check, drink some water, take your medications, assess what's going on. And then once your sugar starts going back a little bit on the lower end, go back and swim.
Great. So Pamela says, I know that milk has sugar in it, but what kind of milk is best for people with diabetes? And she adds, I'm not a fan of nut milks like almond milk.
Neither am I. I love milk. These are great questions. Sometimes now I feel like, I'm going to become a nutritionist as well and really understand the whole mechanisms of different things. But simply put, any type of milk is good. You need it for your bones as well. It all comes down to the quantity. So if you do me a favor, when you go later on after the end of this presentation, you go to your fridge, you look at your milk, check the nutrition label, see first the amount, the quantity that it says there on the nutrition label, the portion size, that's the word I was looking for, and then look down to where it says carbohydrates and really stick to that portion that you need. I would not suggest if you're going to have milk on top of, with a little snack, maybe my recommendation is to have the size of milk in a cup where it's about maybe 15 grams of carbs or less, so you can enjoy something with the added milk.
Great. This is one, I love this question. This comes from an anonymous person. How do sleep habits affect blood sugars?
Very good. There's been a few studies actually looking at that. When you don't get enough sleep, that definitely impacts your sugars. I've seen that with a lot of my patients when they're very well controlled, and now all of a sudden, they come to me like, hey, what's going on? I've noticed, your fasting sugars are a little bit more elevated. Your A1C has gone up. I was like, how's your sleeping patterns? And a lot of them have said, and it's because, I haven't been getting enough sleep. I've been getting 3 to 4 hours when they're under stress. So that definitely impacts your sugars. So if you're experiencing this, that you're not getting a good quality of sleep, you definitely, again, want to ask your healthcare provider so you can troubleshoot and identify what are some issues going on.
Great. Then I have another question for you that's just kind of my own. I like people to know is there's this new concept of time and target. Mm-hmm. What does that mean, and what is that? Why do we have that?
Okay, so talking about time and target, now we gotta love the technology era that we live in. So for those who are not familiar, now we have the ability to check our sugars, not only in a glucose meter when it came to finger pricking, checking your finger stick, but now that we have what we call continuous glucose monitoring device. And these actually portray a better picture of really identifying what's going on. So they just kind of tell the whole story. And that time and range that we're looking, especially if you have that device, is you're trying to aim for that 70% or more when it comes to that target and range, meaning, and everyone's target and range can be different. It just depends on your settings, but preferably it should be between that. I think they're all pretty much set standard. If you don't move it, it's between that 70 to 180 range. And that's considered your time and range. And 70% of your sugars and within a 2-week period should be in that range that we're looking at. Because a lot of things happen day to day.
And more is better, but it's hard to do. It's hard to even get 70% time and range, but that's the goal. And I think part of that is that it's not only your A1C, which some of you are familiar with, some of you not, which is your average blood sugar over the last 3 months, but it's the the velocity of the change. So are we getting lots of variability within that? You could be a 30 and a 450 and have a reasonable A1C, but we don't want that, right? We want more of those blood sugars between 70 and 180. So just something to think about. And I would talk to your healthcare provider about a continuous glucose monitor if you're interested, because it's like watching a movie camera instead of just finger pokes. So here's a good question from Osario. I have to take metformin once a day with a meal. I usually take it in the evening, but I wondered if it would matter if I started taking it in the morning.
It wouldn't matter when you take it, as long as you take it and as long as you're tolerating it well. That's basically what I tell my patients. If it's easier for you to take it, for you not to forget in the evening, then by all means do so. If it's easier for you to take it in the morning, then that's great too.
Okay, so this is from Marcia, and I'll have to apologize for her comment because it's too bad. What are some good resources for someone newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes? The nutritionist I was referred to was a disaster.
Aw.
So I guess pretty
Don't
strict.
give up. There's plenty out there, I promise.
Yeah, exactly. So she said no fruit and gave me any good meal suggestions. So I know the food hub on diabetes.org is great, but what are some other things, Myra, that you would suggest?
That's actually a great question. And again, like also Carla said, I'm sorry, but don't give up. There's someone out there. I tell my patients, I don't like to tell them this is just what you're able to eat. I really I think it's a key point and takeaway is just learning to read your nutrition labels. That's a huge component in looking at that carbohydrates, because everyone has different likes and dislikes. If I present a food option to you, like, oh, here, stick to this, and none of that has your favorite, the components that you want to eat or what you enjoy, you're going to be miserable. So learn what you like, and if something that you really love, let's say, I'll put an example. Okay, let's talk about milk. Since we just got asked that, if you really love milk and you enjoy having a glass of milk every day, well, now that you have diabetes, you want to incorporate that. You want to make sure, I'm going to have a smaller portion. But what I tell my patients is, if you can just learn to take a few seconds and pay attention, what's in your pantry, what's in your fridge, look at those nutrition labels, and that carbohydrates, because a lot of the times as we look into I have patients that told me, well, it says 0 sugar. And it's like, yes, sometimes, but pay attention also to the carbohydrates. That's what's more important, and that portion size. And if you enjoy certain things, it just depends. Different people require different carbohydrates per meal. My rule of thumb and what I educate on my patients sometimes, depends on who they are. I call it kind of like the rule of 30. If they're really looking forward to controlling their sugar and they really want to lose weight, I say, if you can do me the favor of making sure that at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you stick to at least 30 grams of carbs, you're going to be good. If you want to have a snack, you can have 1 or 2 snacks throughout the day. Just make sure that your snacks are at least 10 or no more than 15 grams of carbs, and you should be okay. But that's a number that you want to strive for, and ask your healthcare provider if that's an adequate amount of carbs per meal that you're allowed to have.
Perfect. I have to tell a funny story. So you were talking about looking at the portion size. So I had a young man who came in, and his blood sugar was just crazy high for an afternoon snack. So he went over what he ate. Well, he didn't have the serving size, which is 1/2 cup of his chili. He had the can, which is a gigantic can. So he was eating like 125 grams of carbs. But once again, you have to look at the portion size, because you look at it and it says, oh, there's only 30 grams of carbs in this, but that's for one portion. And like we know with sodas, for example, it's 2.5 portions for one can, whoever has a third of a can. So anyway, just really watch it. She's absolutely right. Really look at the portion size that's on the label if you're using labels. So yeah. Okay. I like this question a lot. This came from Swati. How can we help families who have diabetes, family members who have diabetes?
The best way that we can help them is just being there of support. If they are, a lot of the patients who have diabetes, they feel like, well, it's real hard for me to, eat certain amount of portions when I have my family member next to me and he's able to consume 3 or 4 slices of pizza. And here I am knowing that I'm like, Myra said I can still enjoy my pizza, but instead of, two slices, I'm only enjoying one. Make those, be there for your support. If you know that your family member is only, he's really being very careful with certain carbohydrates that he's eating, and he's certain portions, you want to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be also incorporating that type of portion sizes throughout as a whole. If you notice that they haven't been walking or anything, incorporate like, hey, let's just go out for a walk. Let's just go outside for a few minutes and let's just talk. Tell me how your day is. It's honestly the little things that count. So just being there to provide that daily support and encouragement is going to go a long way.
That's great. I have a question that I'm not sure I can answer. Maybe you can. What is the best anti-obesity drug for someone with type 1 diabetes?
Man. Yeah. I want to say a lot, but I'm like, okay, I can't say too much or whatnot. But I know I have patients myself who have type 1 diabetes, who with time who start struggling with weight, and they're really wanting to lose weight. And as we know, and in case we didn't know, insulin also causes weight gain. So when it comes to medications, there are plenty out there. To say which one is the best one, that would be very difficult to say, but they are out there. There's different options. I would definitely recommend just speaking with your healthcare provider and asking them, I'm really have type 1. I'm struggling. I would like it, give me some options and what's out there. But asking is the first step.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. I think the provider that knows you would be most helpful. Yeah. So we kind of covered this, but not really. Tanisha wants to know, is there a test that can be completed to inform if you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, or is it all trial and error?
No, actually, there's different types of ways of having diabetes diagnosed. The most common way is by the hemoglobin A1C. That's what more myself in the clinic where I work, we routinely do that. So like Carla, you mentioned earlier that A1C gives us your 3-month average. I love sometimes how patients come in and they're like, their A1C is a little elevated. And they're like, oh, it's just because I ate yesterday and I had a big meal. Like, no, this is your 3-month average. So ask your doctor, especially if you want to get screened for diabetes, and ask for that A1C, know your numbers. And that A1C, if you have an A1C greater than 6.5, that's already having diabetes. If you have an A1C between a 5.7 to a 6.4, you're in the pre-diabetes stage. Anything less than 5.7, you're in the green zone, basically.
Great, super. And here's a good question from Swati. Can diabetes cause heart disease?
Definitely. 100% yes. And that's the reason why a lot right now, medications, they're also being looked at for not only improving your glucose levels, but also are these medications that are also going to be helpful and preventing cardiovascular events. So yes, knowing that you have diabetes or a loved one has diabetes, they are at risk for having cardiovascular complications. And that's why it's very important to really get those sugar levels under control in a good way. Not in a bad way, because you can easily control your sugars by having them being on the low side, and we don't want that. But in making sure that you're on the right medications that also help protect your heart.
Thank you. This question comes from Sarah, and I'm sure other people have the same question. No, it actually comes from Tony, sorry, on Facebook.
Hi, Tony.
I have type 2 diabetes, recently diagnosed, and have had COVID. I have been in home isolation for 25 days. I retested, and now it turns out negative. Now I want to get vaccinated. How many days do I have to wait to get vaccinated? Now that's a CDC question, but
that is a CDC question. I would definitely say let's use CDC to guide. Everyone has, it just depends also on the vaccines. Different healthcare providers. I'm not in charge of the vaccination part. I have a lot of colleagues who are in the PCP world in the primary care, and they have different recommendations. Some say you have to wait a couple of months after you've tested positive, because your body kind of has the antibodies for it. But ask your healthcare provider, look at CDC's. The best resource is your healthcare provider. He knows you better, and he can kind of guide you to where to get the vaccine and when you should be able to get it.
Yeah, that's a great question. A great answer. So I have this coming in from Susan. I have to chuckle at it. I take Trulicity.
Mm-hmm.
Can you use up the dose if you cheat too much?
Well, the thing about Trulicity, it just comes in one standard dose. So it comes in like, what I mean by one standard dose, it's like you get your packages and they're all there. You can't kind of tweak it, with Trulicity, as well as what you can with other GLPs, that you can kind of be like, okay, I can kind of go up a few lines or whatnot. But if you are feeling that Trulicity is not working, or it's kind of, because one of the things of the GLPs, Trulicity is a GLP, is it really helps with that satiety. It helps you eat small amounts and you kind of feel like, oh, I feel full, easy. And let's just say you're on Trulicity 1.5 and you're noticing that your sugars are going up, you're being able to eat a little bit more than what you should. You're stress eating. You should definitely talk to your healthcare provider and seeing if it's a time for me to now go up to the higher dose of Trulicity, because there's higher. If you're already on the max dose of the Trulicity, then it's time to kind of figure out, troubleshoot, how are you injecting it? Are you injecting in the same areas? Main thing is, when it comes to any injectables, keeping in mind when we say alternate, we mean not just in two different areas. We mean alternating all around, where you have a subcutaneous, which is a little bit of kind of like love handles, where you want to inject it. So move it around so you can make sure that the medication is being absorbed.
And one person, anybody can overeat any of their meds,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that you could be taking insulin, and if you continue to eat more than you are probably is reasonable, you will need more and more insulin. That is true of these other agents as well. So you can overeat any of these medications so that you end up needing more medication or more of that medication. I don't know if that was your question, but that's an answer. Okay, so this comes from Catherine. We hear the words ketosis, ketogenic, and ketones. What's the difference? And what are they?
Are they really any difference? It's just a different kind of state in the way they, how they're used. One thing that I do want to stress about having, there's a lot of diets out there. A lot of my patients have asked me about, keto diet. You want to make sure that if you are looking to go into a keto diet, basically means very low carbs. Talk to your healthcare provider, seeing if that's something that is adequate for you. I know when we hear the words keto as a healthcare provider, especially if you're type 1, that's something that we don't correlate very well with. That's like, we don't want you to have spilling out ketones in your urine at all. So you want to have the proper amount of carbs, because that's your energy source. But talk to your healthcare provider and see what kind of diet, and if keto diet is what you're looking for, have that conversation with them and seeing if they can guide you and see if it's a fit for you, for your lifestyle.
So we also have someone here that's concerned because they feel like it sounds like we're just talking to people with type 2 diabetes, because people with type 1 diabetes, if they lose weight, it doesn't manage their diabetes, right? It can help. They might need less insulin, but it's not a cure for them because their diabetes is different. So why don't you kind of clarify for everyone the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes? And type 1 diabetes, you have to take insulin. You can be dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's, and you still have to take insulin. So kind of explain to everybody why that is and what the difference is.
So type 1 diabetes, it's more your pancreas stops producing insulin. So you are now faced with that responsibility of having to administer the insulin to help, every time you have your certain meals. So you need insulin to survive, to live, to be healthy. As type 2 diabetes, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like your worker, you overworked it and it's kind of getting tired or it's about to quit on you. So with type 2, lifestyle changes of exercising, losing weight really play a factor in bringing down your sugars, because your pancreas is still producing some insulin and you're just kind of helping it out.
That's great. That's great. And there are people with type 2 diabetes that eventually their beta cells pretty much poop out and they have to take insulin, but usually it's a more gradual process and a different etiology. In fact, there was a discussion for a while about not calling them type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but having different names because they're really, the reason for them to exist is very, very different. Sarah from Facebook. No, Julie from Facebook. Oh, I see that's coming in from Sarah R. I see why I'm saying Sarah, but it's Jewel on Facebook. So with the Dexcom, which for those of you that don't know, that's a continuous glucose monitor that we talked about earlier, can use it anywhere else besides your stomach. I had surgery in my stomach, so the doctor says I can't use that. Is there another place I can use?
You want to, of course, I'm going to inform your healthcare providers. I know when they were studied, Dexcom specifically really emphasized the juice in your abdomen. If you are very limited that you can't put it around your abdomen area, you want to maybe contact the Dexcom support and ask them what are different areas where you are able to place it. I know I have some patients of mine where they're able, they feel comfortable and they want to place it in back of their arm, as well as what the freestyle was. And, I say, if that's going to happen, monitor your sugars more frequently, be on top of how your sugars are doing and monitor them closely and seeing if it's going to differ in regards to your sugar levels.
And what's a sensor is reading is interstitial fluid. So if there is good free flow of fluid in the site, frequently the sensor, even though not FDA approved for those sites, frequently works really well. So as Myra said, just double check it with a finger stick for a while and make sure that that's a good site for you. But people place them all over. So it's just what works for you, but not necessarily what's FDA approved, which is a different discussion. Yeah. So Susan says, what can you do to alleviate the GI symptoms of the Trulicity class of drugs?
Very great questions. One of the questions that I really enjoy is because you want to, I'm going to say the way I kind of educate my patients on this, I kind of call it like a little mini gastric bypass. I always say, do you have a family member or know of someone who had gastric bypass? And a lot of my patients say, yes. And I was like, what happens? They can only eat small. They eat small amounts. If they overeat, they're going to feel those GI symptoms. And that's the main thing when it comes to Trulicity or the GLP-1 medications is you want to eat small, frequent meals. You don't want to eat a very greasy, fatty meal all in one sitting and large portion of it, because chances are you are going to feel bad. You're going to feel nauseated because it provides that sense of fullness, which often gets mistaken for that symptom of nausea. But small, frequent meals, if you are going to want to eat something greasy or fried, just a smaller portion. What I say is take a few bites, have a sip of water. If you still feel like, hey, I still feel a little bit more hungry, go grab a few more bites and just nice and slow.
Great. Well, I hate to say this, but I think we are out of time. We have more than 100 questions in the queue. I would love to answer them all. So, so sorry. This wraps up our last question. A few items before we close, though. If you could give us the 3 takeaway messages you want people to most remember from this session.
One, find your support system. I can't stress enough. Find the support system that includes your family, your loved ones, your healthcare providers, your diabetes educator. Learn as much as you can, every day. Don't give up on learning, finding those resources. Second is learn to read a nutrition label, look at that portion size, look at the carbohydrates, and find the right amount of grams of carbohydrates per grams that you're comfortable with per meal. And snacks, make sure that when it comes to snacks, small, low carbs, less than 10 or 15 grams of carbs. Incorporate physical activity any way or form. Go dancing, go swimming, just incorporate that. And you can, don't give up. Don't give up on yourself if you have diabetes. This is a disease that you can definitely control.
Thank you. Whether type 1 or type 2, actually.
Yes,
and using
type 1
all,
or type, yes.
Yeah, using all those components. The
Mhm.
difference with type 2 type 1 diabetes is you always have to inject insulin and kind of finagle that. But those are great tips for anyone with diabetes. So thriving with diabetes takes a village, and we're here to support you at ADA. Special thanks to Dr. Myra Cantazaro and our sponsor for this event, which is Walmart. I'm Carla Cox, and on behalf of the ADA team, we want to thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting with you at our next Ask the Experts event, July 27, Prevent Sight Loss, What's in Your Toolbox, and on August 10, Diabetes Takes a Team, Who's on Yours? Register for an upcoming event. Please go to diabetes.org/experts. I am so sorry we were unable to get to all your questions during the live Q&A. They were great questions. If you have questions about this event, you are welcome to contact us at Ask ADA, so ASKADA at diabetes.org, or by calling 1-800-342-2383. We'd love to get your feedback on this event. Remember to look for our short survey in your email box. Don't just delete it. Look for it. Your feedback is very important to us and will help us for future planning. Thank you and stay well. And thank you, Myra.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.